If you're looking for a guidebook on how to not screw up your kids, this is a really great resource to have. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Lindsay C. Gibson. Today, I am joined by the amazing Oprah level, New York Times bestseller, famous level Dr. Lindsay C. Gibson, and we are going to be talking about how to raise an emotionally mature child. And specifically, I'm going to be asking questions about how to raise an emotionally mature older teen. And hi, Dr. Gibson, and hi to everybody who's listening. If you don't already know Lindsay or you don't already know me, I'm going to be introducing us in a little bit because the first question I want to start with is why are we even talking about or why are we caring about emotional maturity in the first place?
Great question. And that is part of the reason why I wrote this new book is that I have been writing about it for, well, really since 2000 when my very first book came out. So, it's been 25 years that I've been studying this whole issue of what's the difference between emotional maturity and immaturity. And then I began to think about, wow, people need to understand more about what emotional maturity really looks like and what it is that we're striving for, especially when we're raising our children, because we need more emotional maturity in our world. I mean, and it's not a mystery about how you get it or how it's formed, but it's not something that is put out there in the form of this particular concept, this goal that we're striving for, either in ourselves or in our children. Even though when we're trying to do self-realization, self-actualization, or raise capable kids, that's exactly what we're shooting for. We're trying to grow ourselves up. We're trying to mature as human beings and as parents. So that sort of opening up for me, that shift from helping people that have emotionally immature parents and what they went through and how that affected them to, hey, let's do something about this. And while we're working on ourselves, let's think about how we can be helping the next generation grow up with emotional maturity as just part of their normal development.
You mentioned people know how to build that skill. Would you call it a skill or maturity, or what would you call that?
Well, it's twofold. I mean, on the one hand, we and our children and all human beings and plants and animals, I mean, the living world is designed to go from immaturity to maturity through a series of steps that have to happen kind of in order for the human being or the plant or the animal to thrive, not just survive, but to actually do more than the absolute necessities in order to create more life in the world. Okay, so we all have that drive to mature that's inside us. But then on top of that, we also get our energy from that growth toward things that interest us, that make us feel good about ourselves, that make us feel hopeful about life, that give us a sense of trust in the world and in whatever it is that's around us that can support us. That feeling that we have is something that we can cultivate. And lucky people get that from their family, from their parents. They grow up in that milieu, just like the fish in water. But a lot of us grow up in families where that kind of hope and trust is not easy to come by because of the parents' limitations and because of their emotional immaturities. So, yeah, we do have that drive to mature. That's our intrinsic makeup. But we have to have the opportunities and the interactions to get past some sticking points or crisis points so that our growth goes in a healthy way rather than maybe getting us stuck in something.
Thank you for that. the idea of what are the steps to not just to raise an emotionally mature child, which is what I would love to spend most of our time, but even just raising ourselves to become emotionally mature, thinking about those again, I don't know where to grasp for this word skill. We know how to cultivate intellectual intelligence, and then there are books on emotional intelligence, but emotional maturity is it's to me, to you, it's obviously very clear, but to me, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what it means. Does it mean that we feel safe in the uncertainty? Does it mean that when things go awry in the world, we feel safe enough? I didn't realize we were going to be so philosophical, but I'm noticing I don't fully grasp maturity.
I think we don't. I mean, I think what you're putting your finger on right now is tremendously important. And that's part of my quest or my mission is to make this concept of emotional maturity something that people can use as a concept that will come to mind, that will readily be identifiable, because now we have this term. So I'm
Mm,
exactly with you. I don't think it's been clear at all what emotional maturity is, as opposed to, say, emotional intelligence. So one thing I want to go back to that you said that I thought was so interesting was you were saying that maybe emotional maturity is when you can manage a sense of safety within yourself. Okay, when things get rocky. And I just want to clarify there that actually, when things get really bad, none of us feel safe. And it's
mm,
impossible to feel safe because our bodies take over. So it's not a marker of maturity about whether or not you get anxious or you don't feel safe or you don't know what to do or you feel insecure. Everybody feels that at some point. I mean, you let things get bad enough, we all go there. The difference with emotional maturity is that you have some other place within yourself to go when you are feeling that way, that you have become a complex enough person and you have learned from your past experience enough, and you have learned to anticipate that things can be different in the future. In other words, you've got this complex understanding of reality, which is a sign of maturity. And you're not just stuck in the present moment being tossed around by your own emotional reactions and impulses. Okay.
mm,
You're not a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old inside who's just doing stuff, trying to make themselves feel better. You are feeling all those 2 and 4-year-old feelings, okay, because we're like little Russian nesting dolls. We never lose that little guy inside of us.
mm-hmm,
But the maturity is all the other nesting dolls on top of that that
mm,
contain and form an adult life out of these very old inner experiences that maybe never leave us. We keep that familiarity with those feelings, but now we have a mind that can think of ways to deal with it and knows how to get support from other people and doesn't just jump on the first impulse that crosses their mind. That the
mm,
maturity is really a journey toward a complexity inside that will
mm,
make you resilient, because now instead of just, holding a hammer, you have a whole garage full of implements,
mm.
from screwdrivers to rakes, that you have accumulated through interacting with people who have been emotionally mature enough to help you understand about these other things and how they work.
Mm,
So it's the emotional
yeah.
maturity is no protection against being human, okay? But it does give you a sense of self, that there is a me that continues through even awful experiences, and which can help you calm yourself down enough to be able to think through difficult
Mm,
situations. That's what grown-ups do. They calm
mm,
themselves down and think through difficult situations. That's what we're trying to give our kids.
I'm hearing a lot of things here, Lindsay, and I'm going to try and hold on to the pieces that I most want to bring back. And I wrote down the one I definitely want to bring back to, which is I'm hearing one, it's building a lot of different tools that we can reach for. Two is that all humans, we are going to have moments where we get kicked up, and just neurobiologically, there are layers of our brain that don't live in linear time. So, of course, they're going to show up. And I think I'm hearing you say the maturity is having a homeopathic dose of ourselves outside of the whoosh to be like, okay, we're definitely whooshed. And we can reach for a rake or a hammer or a screwdriver or this we get this whole tool shed, and it feels really bad and you're okay, and then making these mature choices, which so many of us, just because we're adults, we like to, it's very hard. Even as I'm listening to you, I'm like, don't say I haven't been mature as an adult. I've definitely been mature. But I know that's not what you're saying. And the other piece I want to pull forward that you mentioned is being tossed around versus resilient. And I think that's, for me, why the timeliness of this book is so important, because we are in a very fast changing world. And there was a time where if you did, you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and it's all going to be fine. I'm just even thinking about like the if you if you get good grades, then you can get a good job, then you can support your family, and it's all, and this world is so changing, so topsy-turvy, and there's no firm role that if you are this, this is going to all be fine. And so having that resilience, that adaptability, raising our kids for a time of we don't even know what we're raising them for right now with the technology changing so quickly. It seems like this is the time to have a better concept and understanding of what maturity is so that we're prepared. Am I on same, are
Absolutely.
we on the same page here?
Absolutely. In fact, when I was trying to pull together the ideas for this and write the proposal for it, when I was looking for a publisher, that was one of the things that really stood out to me was exactly, we do not know what we're preparing our child for. We really don't. What we want to be able to do is help them become the kind of people who have a sense of self so that as things are changing in the world around them, they can still have a sense of a me
Mm.
in there that they can return to in some kind of centering way that helps them to regulate their emotion, their panic at times, their despair at times, these human feelings that we all have when things seem insurmountable, because they will.
Mhm.
So, to be able to give them that feeling that I may not know what to do right now, that's to be expected, but I can call this person, or I'm going to look for a book on this, or I'm going to go take a walk outside. I'm going to sit and contemplate. I mean, these kinds of ways that I can use my intuition, I can use myself to deal with this very difficult situation or this change. That is the heart of adaptability.
Mm.
And that's what they're going to need, because we don't know what AI is going to create in the workforce going down the road. And we already know that having a college degree is not quite the panacea to, all our concerns
Economic safety that it
success.
once
Yeah, I
was.
mean, it's really unfortunate, but it used to be. It used to be. But now we want people that can bring themselves back to center and really meet life like a grown up. And I think we all know what that actually means, even though it's hard to define. But
Mm.
a real grown up is somebody who can handle stress. They can get along well in their relationships, and they are able to go into a situation where they're not getting what they want, things aren't going well, and they can still come up with a response to that situation that makes things a little bit better instead of a lot worse.
I really want to take a moment and to feel into that one, that we can respond in a way that makes things a little bit better instead of a whole lot worse. Because as you're talking about showing up as a grown up, of course, a lot of me is with you, and then part of me is pinged at the same time, thinking about times that I know as all humans, we all show up not as a grown up. So I want to name that if anyone else, as you're listening to us talking and you're thinking about times that you didn't show up as a grown up, if you also feel pinged, to be like, oh, but let's land in, even if I had a moment of whoa, that idea of coming back to enough, a homeopathic dose of it to be able to make things a little bit better in a hard situation versus a whole lot worse because of how we react. I think that's really
Absolutely.
powerful.
And I love your phrase moments of woe.
Mm.
That's what it's all about. It's not do this and you won't have any more moments of woe. It's do this and you'll know what to do
Mm,
when you have the
mm.
moments of woe.
I
And
love
moments of
that.
woe, like I said, that can include despair. It can include some pretty dark feelings if things get bad enough. So we have to give ourselves grace
Mm,
that we are not in control of our emotional instincts and animal reactions. I mean, that's going to go on in our brain because our bodies want us to survive. We can't get away from that.
mm,
But we can befriend those scared parts of our minds, and we can do that remothering or reparenting of that inner self in
mm,
a way that everybody gets strengthened, as we're coping with the
mm.
situation.
I love that. Well, we went farther into why speaking about maturity now is important, but I'm so, so glad we did because really points to why this is the time to be talking about this book. I was just thinking about the time of like, do as I say, and children should not be seen to very child-centered, which seemed to have swung a pendulum. And it just seems like now is the time for empowerment in parenting, cultivating or supporting maturity, even if we're also learning what that means. This is a really, I think, a pivotal shift, and it's being captured in your book. It's kind of here in the zeitgeist of or the field of where we're heading. How is that landing? Am I being too
Absolutely.
philosophical?
No, no. I mean, philosophy is about how do we become wise? It's the love of wisdom. Um,
Mm.
so that's what we're trying to do here. I don't think you can talk about these things without getting philosophical.
Oh, thank you for normalizing and for it makes my heart smile and my face smile to be in conversation I can roll like it where I don't feel shame because I've gone off on a tangent.
And I think that's where all the interesting stuff happens is the associations to some of the
Mm.
main points. I mean, that's always when my ears perk up when I'm listening to a podcast.
Mm. So I'm going to formally introduce you. I have it all written out, and
Okay.
I this is just very fun to say. Dr. Lindsay C. Gibson, PsyD, is a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, and clinical psychologist with over 30 years of psychotherapy experience. Her best-selling book, which is this one, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, has sold over 1 million copies and been translated into 38 languages. And I loved watching it grow over years and years, like from like, oh, there's some people who know it to billions of people know it. It's amazing. Dr. Gibson provides national and international training programs for psychotherapists and is the author of 8 books. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, and has appeared on major podcasts like the Oprah podcast, Mel Robbins, and 10% Happier. The editorial reviews for this book, which is going to be coming out next week, include reviews by Mel Robbins, Dr. Becky Kennedy, John Gottman, and Nedra Glover Tawwab. And so you are pretty darn famous, Lindsay. And for those of you, if you don't know me, hi, I'm Simona. I have a super long last name, so I go by Simona Vivi H, but my full name is Simona Vivi Haji George Alice. And I coach and mentor moms of older teens to navigate, have conversations, and hold loving boundaries so that you can raise and launch a confident, resilient adult. And I'm also the founder of remothering.org, where I've had the privilege of collaborating with Lindsay and with Dr. Nicole LaPera and others. And the work that I do over at remothering.org means that I see the impact of what happens down the road when moms don't seek the tools like you're doing here today. So I want to acknowledge you for being here and prioritizing this because it really, truly does make a difference. And I wrote down I have intentions for our time together. So let me just grab those and read them. I don't know how you did it with Oprah and, and the New York Times and all the other ones that you've been on because whoo, I get these surges of nervousness and I'm like, oh. And Lindsay, I have intentions for our time together today, and I want to share them with you and with everyone listening so they can follow along. My first intention is for parents to know about your new books so that their kids won't have to lean into this book quite as often as they may still, and we'll be talking about that. There's no myth of perfection, and it's okay if our kids are looking for tools, but they won't have to lean into it quite as often as some of us may have. So that's my number one intention. My number two is to talk about how to raise emotionally mature children. There's a lot of great things in this book, and we're going to be diving into that as well. And hopefully, people can come away with our conversation with some tips and tools. And three is to enjoy spending time with you because as I was preparing, I was noticing I was getting excited, and then I was getting nervous, and then this morning was full of procrastivity where I was trying to be productive and I was definitely procrastinating. And then I was like, Simona, just enjoy because this human venture is so complicated for all of us. And so to have these moments where we get to walk a little leg of the journey and feel a belonging and an accompaniment is just it's a precious thing and
It's
I'm
the
so
best,
grateful.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best.
So the questions, there's two paths we can take, and I'm curious, Lindsay, if you think that, and maybe it's half and half, but will people be finding this book because they have read your other books, or will they be finding this book because their parents seeking information about parenting? Because that's two different things. If it's parents seeking how to raise kids, we dive right in here. If it's parents who are seeking how to raise kids because they don't want to leak their generational material onto their kids and they already know that they have leaked some of their generational material, then that's a slightly, they both get to the same place because this book has really powerful fundamental principles no matter what. And then it has life cycle specifics, and we'll be specifically talking about the life cycle specifics of teens, but there's also life cycle specifics for babies and toddlers, etc. So the places we get to ultimately are the same, but how do we go in?
Yeah, I guess we'll find our way. But I think the book was really written for both.
Hmm.
As I conceptualized it definitely was any parent who is afraid that they won't know what to do and that they're going to make mistakes that are going to have serious repercussions on their kids. That's who I want to be scrolling through the internet or walking through a bookstore and see that book and say, that's what I need. I need a manual. I need to understand how you do this. How do you raise an emotionally mature child?
Hmm.
And I think that people who have maybe been familiar with the other book and are more familiar with the term emotional immaturity and maturity, maybe because of their exposure to that book or that topic, they're going to want to pick it up because it is the answer to one of their worst fears.
Mm.
If they're going to have children or they're contemplating having children, which is I don't want any child to go through what I went through or to feel emotionally lonely and unimportant and unable to maybe follow the best life for themselves because they feel like they have to think of everybody else first all the time. So I think it's really directed at both.
That makes sense.
But if you even if you had very emotionally mature, psychologically well developed parents, I think there's a lot of child development that we don't come equipped to know, and we don't know what for each age the child is trying to solve a particular issue, a particular developmental issue. And if we just know that, if we just learn that, it takes so much of a lot of stuff stops seeming so personal with our
Mm,
kids' behavior, and we start to understand, oh,
mm,
they're driven to be this way,
mm.
and that helps a lot.
That actually points me to where I'd like to start, which is, as you said, that one of right towards the beginning of the book, you talk about how the ground rules might change from stage to stage. So what you're pointing to is that even if we won the womb lot, even if someone listening won the womb lottery and they had a parent who was able to model so many of these things, no human being is necessarily going to be great at modeling every single stage of parenting anyway. So this is a great manual for finding those tools. And so, I love that. I love that. As you're listening, I'm curious if you want to pop in the comments which path you came in. I like the idea of someone walking down the aisle and wanting to learn more, wanting to do more, because the only perfect parents I've ever come upon are my clients' parents. Like, and, like, who are like, I was definitely perfect. It is all your fault. And so I think that what you're pointing to is if we know that we are fallible human beings, if we're comfortable knowing that we're human, which actually I'm joking, but I'm not joking. It does take quite a bit of work to feel comfortable in our imperfections and safe in our imperfections. But if we, especially as parents, when it's like the thing we most want to be and do is be amazing parents. So maybe there's right there, level one of maturity is knowing that we are imperfect and we're still safe.
Yes, and I'm just thinking that in our American culture, I'll just take that as an example, but in plenty of cultures in the world, there is a real idealization of the machine or the computer as sort of what we all should be striving for. And we are just besotted with this idea that there is perfectibility possible, and
Mm,
we want to evermore become more able and more predictably able to function at this very high level all the time as a good machine might. And that is not emotional maturity. That is a view of being human that is very unrealistic. And it also doesn't take into account that all the time we are dealing with emotions, we're dealing with instincts and impulses. This is part of us being human. And
mm,
so to sort of discard that and say, no, really, it's our logical reasoning mind that is the goal for perfection, and that's where we want to stay. That's like only using half of our personality to deal with life. And,
mm,
as we all may have noticed, we are caught unaware by very surprising and unpredictable things. And that is handled most of the time by the more emotional, intuitive centers in our brain that have amassed all this information about what's the best way to respond to this feeling I'm getting from this situation. Is this a time to be
mm,
on guard? Is this a time to reach out? What do I sense is the
mm.
best way to proceed here? The machine can never do that. So I just want to say that when we are acknowledging that we're not even trying to be perfect, that
Mm.
we are managing a very messy kind of psychology and bunch of needs inside ourselves, we are much more on the path of being able to deal with life in a more adaptable, successful way than we would be if we were trying to be this perfect machine.
I love that. We're gonna take a very hard turn and change gears because I want to talk about tactics here. And I want to start with this one because it really caught my attention. I'm leaning into page 38, at least in the copy I have, it's page 38, but it's talking about conflict over limits can be a good sign. And I'd love I'm going to read a little bit about it, and then I would love to talk to you more about it because it was a little provocative. And I was like, ooh, especially because I know this book is for all parents, and so toddlers have their own version of no, but older teens have a very specific version of no that is present often in the work that I do. So conflict over limits can be a good sign. Sometimes your child's need to feel empowered will lead to conflict with you, but that's to be expected if they're going to grow up and have a mind of their own. They're not trying to defeat you. They're testing out their ability to exert willpower and get what they want. No child is tactful when they're first experimenting with feelings of empowerment, but it doesn't mean they're deliberately trying to weaken or disrespect you. So if it feels like you're getting caught up in power struggles with your child, try to appreciate that they're trying to feel effective in this world. And then I want to pair that with something else that you said later in the book, which is if your child has to choose between their I'm not exactly sure the language, I can't remember, and your wishes, and they continue to choose yours, that's not what we want. And so can we say more about that?
Yes, I think that that passage that you're referring to is something like if if they have to choose between pleasing you and
Mm.
actualizing themselves, pray that they don't betray to themselves. I think was something
Oh,
like that.
wow. Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah.
Yes, because of course, what makes our job easier as parents when they're growing up, or at least when they're little, is it makes our job much easier if they tune themselves out and just pay attention to what we say. And that's been the dominant parenting model. That's sort of like been the gold standard that you're shooting
Or
for as a parent, right?
that was maybe not recent years, but for many of the people who are listening who
Yes.
have children who are like older teen, young adult age, for sure when we were growing up, that was the
Yeah,
that was the
that
thing.
was definitely the 20th century model. Yes. So, what we want to think about more now, I think, as our hopefully our model is shifting, our goalpost is moving toward how are we going to help our child grow up to be the kind of person that can not only survive but thrive in a world where economically, culturally, things are changing so fast that they're going to have to rely on their own instincts and intuitions and judgments much more than people used to in the past. I remember when our son was telling us when he first started his work life as a young adult, and he was telling us about how he was going to switch jobs. And I think he'd been at one place for a year, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, don't do that, Joe! You look terrible on your resume." And you just stick it out a little while longer. That's not going to look good. And he said in his culture, this was in a big city, he said, Mom, it would look strange if I stayed in a job for more than a year. This is
Mm.
sort of in the tech industry thing.
Mhm.
Um, and that really set me back. Because I recognized at this deep level that he was probably exactly right. And he understood that culture and where things have gotten to much better than I did. So that was, I think, the last career advice I ever gave him. but what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise our child to be able to have their fingertips on the pulse of the situation that they're in. We want them to have situational awareness. And man, that situation is changing hour by hour now. So when we are allowing them to practice their own empowerment with us, that is basically, that boils down to saying no, or I don't want to do that, or I disagree with that, or I don't like that. If we can be flexible enough, I'm thinking now of like a lacrosse player who catches the ball in his net, on the
Mhm.
fly, or her net on the fly. It's that ability to respond to our child in a way where we don't knock them down and incapacitate them so that they'll be obedient. We catch what they're trying to do, which is they're trying to learn how to be an empowered, confident person who knows what they need and what they think. That's what we're trying to produce when it comes down to their adult outcome. So, how do we go about doing that? We go about doing that by, catching their behavior in the net and working with them as another sentient, feeling, wise human being who's a lot younger than us, but who has all the same entitlement to that kind of respectful treatment as a human being that we do. And let me give you an example. So let's say that you raise a child who really gets the message that you don't disagree with people in authority, and you wait and see what they think is the best thing to do, and then you try to accommodate them. That'll make you the teacher's pet. That'll get you the job. It'll make you someone that people turn to. It's all good in the parent's mind. And now let's say that child or that young teenager goes out with a friend of theirs who shoplifts. Okay. And your child is not happy about that. They don't like that, but it would not occur to them to say to someone that they were in a close relationship with, hey, I don't like that, put it back. I'm not going to stay here with you if you do that. That would not occur to them because their most basic subconscious learning is that if I want to maintain my loving relationship with this person, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and not rock the boat. That is what in our times we do not want our children to have as their only response to things that are not good for them.
You're pointing to a couple of things that I'm noticing, and then I want to bring it back to the other question is you do not want to raise a child who's going to be disrespectful. So how to find that right balance. But what I'm hearing before I pull on that one is when you're talking about the consequences of a parent who expects not to be crossed and what that does. And the example you gave of a child being with a shoplifter, but to bring that into adulthood, that's where we get into some of those adaptations like people pleasing, pretzeling, having a really hard time including ourselves in the equation. And the ripple effect of that is tremendous. And back to tactics. So someone's pushing back, and let's use an example of a teenager, because sometimes when they're pushing back, their language is off-putting, I want to hear what you have to say about this and how to react to that. What I'm imagining is, hey, you're so welcome to push back, but I don't like the way you're speaking to me right now.
Perfect.
So it's not like push back and it's okay to be completely ick.
No, I mean, I like to take an example like that, like in this case, it's maybe a teenager, but just think about your adult relationships. How would you respond to a dear friend who talked to you in a way that you didn't like, or your partner talked to you in a way that you didn't like, or maybe someone who worked for you talked to you in a way you didn't like? I mean, how would you handle it with them? Well, you probably would not reach into your bag of tricks and pull out the one which is, I'm in control here and you're a nobody. And what I say goes. I mean, you're not going to do that because that other person has power too. And if you have any awareness of cause and effect, you'll know that you may be setting yourself up for worse problems down the road if you tried to dominate or control in that way.
It's interesting using that word control right there because I think really salty teenager, like coming at you, there is this instinct to be like, go to your room. And what you're pointing to is, oh, want to keep that in context of you're talking to another human being. And because that all of a sudden, as you're saying that go to your room is really a I have power over you moment instead of a relational moment to be like, whoa, we got to de-escalate this thing right here and right now.
Exactly. Which is getting the same result as what you hoped would happen when you sent them to their room. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to de-escalate the situation, right? And calm yourself down by getting them out of your face. So
Mm.
your instinct is good, like let's regulate ourselves by creating some distance. But if you do it in a way that communicates you're not somebody that I respect, and I'm going to order you around in a way that makes you feel small, maybe we're not going to be getting the ultimate result that we really want. So, what we're
Mm.
trying to do is we're trying to, in the moment, respond. And this is, so much of this is intuitive, right? Because there will be times when we get over reactive and say, go to your room, or don't you dare talk to me that way. I mean, we're not in a conciliatory problem solving mode at all. We're in a survival mode. Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like that's well, we've done it before we even know we did it. So
Yeah.
we have to accept that, but we can get back to the point. Okay. Let's say you did that. Let's say you just reacted and said, go to your room. And then in the, next 2 minutes, you're downstairs in the kitchen thinking, well, now what do we do? And I'm not sure that was the best way to handle it. And okay, now you can go upstairs and knock on their door and ask to come in and say, honey, I don't like the way I just handled that. But the way that you were talking to me activated my sense of unsafety, or that made me feel threatened as your parent, or that made me feel uncomfortable or disrespected. Find your own language.
Mm-hmm.
You have a chance to repair that and get onto a different footing. And you're at the same time showing your child you can come back and kind of do the next right thing in the situation to begin to fix whatever the mistake is that you made, or to make things have the higher probability of turning out better. But you're not giving your child permission to speak badly to you, but you also, as a parent, have to realize that kids do not have the same brakes on their mind and their tongue that we do. Their brains have not developed to that point. Just don't have it. Impulse control is something that develops steadily, from the time that they're toddlers until they're grown-ups. But particularly, they've measured that with preteens through older teens. And it really is increasing. They really are getting better at impulse control, unbelievably, when you when you see some of the behaviors that they do. It doesn't stop them from taking risks, okay, and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But their brain ability to control their impulses is steadily getting better, but it's nowhere near what an adult has. So when your child loses their cool on you, you also have to, in a way, regard them as this unfinished organism that doesn't have the wherewithal to do things in that more mature way yet. Your job is to repeat the lesson, which is, I would like to hear what you have to say, but when you're using that tone of voice on me, I feel disrespected. And then that makes me kind of defensive. And then it's hard for me to listen. So can we back up here and start again? Can you tell me what is really going on here and what's the matter?
Oof, that is gold, what you just said, what you just modeled. There were a number of things that you just said there, and I would love to pull out a few things. One of the things that caught my ears is you said makes them feel small as we're trying to control them. And I don't imagine that any parent is thinking that or trying to do that. Or I imagine anyone listening to this conversation would be planning to do that on purpose. So I'm always just really protective of a listener feeling like it's this communication where someone can't say like, that's not what I meant.
And that certainly wasn't their
sure it wasn't
intention,
intended.
was not intended.
I'm certain that wasn't intended. The other thing I heard you say,
I just want to mention here, Simona, what a great thing to say to your child, since we're talking about modeling this. I'm sure you're not intending to
mm,
make me feel disrespected,
oh,
but that's how it's coming across to me right now. Can we
oh,
just take a minute and back up and you tell me what's wrong?
oh, so good. Love that modeling. The other thing I heard you say is getting to, in that interaction, we get to model both de-escalation and we get to model repair. And
Yeah.
like these are such critical and important skills that so many of us have had to learn as adults. So if we get to model that for our kids, that's so powerful. And I want to say if the idea of modeling de-escalation or modeling repair is edgy, that I'm going to point back to some of your earlier books because if we didn't have it modeled for us, and actually I'm just going to point back to one so that people can choose one book to start with. If we didn't have it modeled for us, it might be stretchy all of a sudden as we're learning how to model it for our kiddos. So if you're finding that there's some stretchy spots that you're like, oh, I didn't have that when I was growing up, there is a resource. And if you want to speak to a person live, Dr. Gibson is currently not seeing clients, but will imagine be seeing clients another day in the future. And so if you're listening to this and it's a now moment, I do host not every single month, but many months I host live workshops for moms of older teens. It's online, it's via Zoom, and we typically cover a theme like how to set loving boundaries is one, how to navigate power struggles is one, and then those wrap up with live Q&A. So if you have questions, there's an amazing resource here. You can come find me. There should be links somewhere around this video, and you can get those questions answered because this is not an easy task.
No, it's not. And it's a beautiful, effective thing that you're doing to do
Mm,
that in a setting where you have other parents who are also attending. I mean, that kind of group support and that sense of I don't have to feel ashamed because other people
mm,
are in the same boat is so helpful.
mm. Yeah, it's very fun's not the exact right word, but there's something really special about special is not the right word either, but there's something really like an exhale and shoulders down to realize that we're not the only ones navigating these hard
Yes.
and complex things, and that if we know that someone else has, it also means that there's a, a trail map, a set of skills that we get to learn. They're learnable skills and they're things that we can address.
Yes, and you had mentioned this another time. We have very versatile, adaptable brains. And so we're not stuck with where we are. And when you
Mm,
have a safe place to try out some different things or learn different ways of being, that brain plasticity kicks in.
mm,
It's like anytime we are given a better way that gets us better results, the brain never wants to go back to the old way. The brain
mm,
is always on for what's going to help me survive and thrive better.
mm,
Your brain is going to change and it's not going to go back to the old way once it understands that something is more effective. And
mm,
the most beautiful way of gaining self-acceptance is through that kind of group work. So yay.
mm. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that reflection back on that work. And you were just talking about neuroplasticity, which you mentioned just now also when you were talking about teen brains, it's in here as well, which is the idea, and I think this is really helpful for all of us to keep in mind, is that it's not that our teens' brains are younger adult brains. They're really in a very different phase of growth. And there's a few things that you mentioned in here in terms of the developing mind. And one of them is this idea of the risk-taking parts of our brain are going to be moving faster than the parts of our brain that are like, hey, let's think about the long-term consequences of this. And so there's this moment that our teens are in where there's I, a discrepancy is not the right word, but there's this mismatch of what's possible and where the gas and the brakes, I would say, are not calibrated the same.
No, they are not. Yeah, I mean, at the same time that, uh, well, let me back up for a second and put this in an order that may make it easier to follow. So this sounds counterintuitive, but the parts that start developing into their adult form in the brain in a teenager, those parts are the emotional centers of the brain. They grow up first, which means that there is an activation and a sensitization of the emotional centers in the brain before the other parts of the brain having to do with being able to delay gratification, think ahead, restrain oneself, these things that we associate with the frontal part of the brain. That lags behind the emotional development. And we don't think about it like that. We think that they haven't developed their adult brain yet. Like everything else is staying the same. Okay. And then somehow the teenage brain becomes more adult. No, the teenage brain is changing, like from the floorboards up, the brain is changing with this infusion of development into the emotional centers. They feel more pleasure than they will ever feel in their life. They enjoy things more than they ever will. They hurt more deeply than they ever will. They have the capacity now for very deep, very dark emotions that human beings can have. All of that is an emotional deepening that in nature's wisdom is there for their survival, for their flourishing as an adult. Of course, we as parents who are getting the brunt of this emotional development, this emotionality and intensity, we may not think it's a really cool thing, but it is. And it has to be there before you start tinkering with it and getting it under control and beginning to direct it in constructive ways. So we have to understand that kid's brain is undergoing a kind of a remodeling that we probably cannot remember happening in its enormity because we were just trying to get through the day when we were 14, 15, 16.
Actually, I'd love to pop right on to that. Yes, we might not. Also, if we are, now I'm going to go right into this piece of work. If we are the adult children of emotionally immature parents, many of us were like, all right, we got to raise ourselves. We moved into hyper independence, hyper vigilance, hyper productivity. And so, yes, our developing minds might have naturally wanted to do that. But as you're describing that part of my brain, I'm like, I'm sure my brain did that. But I remember being like, okay, I gotta handle all the things and be super responsible. And so that actually hits on something that some parents of older teens face, which is they would never, let's talk about lateness to school, which is such a small thing, but it's actually a really big thing. And it's so common and in conversations, which is a parent who would, as they were developing, still figured out how to get all their hormones and all of the developing mind in check
Mm-hmm.
so that they could show up how they were supposed to show up, so that they could navigate the childhood that they had. And so
Yes.
now they have a teen who may have a naturally developing brain, as you're describing, who may be late to school chronically. And you're like, as a parent, like, it's like, what are you talking about? Handle what you need to handle. Like, how could you ever even conceive of getting a tardy? And so, can we talk about that interesting balance of yes, their brains are developing, and yes, it's really important for us to understand, but it's also a little hard to wrap a head around if that's your personal, if one's personal history is being super on top of things, because you have to be, and then you have a child who has a naturally developing brain. You're like, I love you, and I'm so glad you feel free to not be hyper vigilant, but no, like it's time to be in school. And can we talk about that really both at a high level, but then very tactically when that becomes a repetitive argument?
Yes. So a lot of people who had emotionally immature parents had to grow up too fast. And they learn to prematurely develop that more self-controlled, hypervigilant part of the mind that thinks ahead, thinks about what could happen, worries about stuff, takes on responsibility for other people, keeps things going. They become hyper competent people that are, frankly, worried all the time about
So
what
I
could.
don't, I'm gonna say I wouldn't have necessarily identified as worried because I was like, there's nothing to worry about. I got a plan A, B, C, D, and E. It's all handled.
Yes, but that was probably your coping mechanism
Well, I'm just saying
for
I didn't
that
identify with the word
for that
worry.
yeah, for what otherwise might have manifested as worry. Okay. But if you have the smarts, you can launch into a coping mechanism like your planning and your organization so that you never even are aware that you were worried all the time. I mean, that's the beauty
Fair.
of
It's
it.
totally fair.
That's the beauty of a defense mechanism, right? I mean, it doesn't pop in after we're worrying. It pops in so that we don't worry or we don't have this painful feeling.
Totally.
So yeah. So if you had to grow up too soon and you had to rely on yourself, it's really well, two things. It's hard to imagine that your child can't do that too.
Hmm.
Hard to imagine that they wouldn't just do that.
Hmm.
And then it's hard to watch somebody else get something that you never got. I mean, I don't care if it
Mm.
is your own precious, adorable kid. When you see them and they could be getting it from you, the safety and the healthy entitlement and the self-confidence to tell you what they really think or tell you what they want, that can be a little hard to take because it sort of reminds you of what you had to do at that age in order to adapt to your family system.
Mm.
Okay. So it can be a little painful to watch your child get to do things that you would never have been allowed to do.
Like feeling that grief of like, oh, my poor little self didn't get to experience that.
Yes. And also,
Mm.
hey, how come this entitled kid gets to treat me this way when I didn't get to say boo to my parents if I had a difference of opinion? It's a little envy thing that
Mm.
that we can fall into unwittingly, not realizing that. So again, that's where the knowledge of the stages of psychological development or what kids are going through at different times, that's where that conceptual knowledge or education really helps because now it makes sense why we're kind
Mm.
of quote unquote putting up with their saying what they really feel or what they really want or
Hmm.
contesting a limit. Then it makes sense if we understand that that is part of their developmental need at that age. Whereas if we didn't have that information, we would just be left ourselves dealing with all the emotions about it and our reactions to it.
So there's a few
Yeah, the
different
sense
sense making pieces. The sense making of like, oh, we're confused as to why they would even consider that because of our own personal history. Oh, we may be facing either grief for our little selves or envy or a combination of those things. We get to understand how their brain is developing and why this is. And we get to say, oh, that's acceptable that there's pushback. And then in a respectful way, we get to have that conversation. But then let's talk about the tardiness is something that I just see a theme over and over again. I get emails about it. It's a frustration for so many parents. It's one of these really, really tricky and sticky situations. Can we talk more about it?
yes, it is because at the point you're talking about, they're probably as big as you are, and you're not going to go in and haul them out of bed and dress them. So at that point, you are looking at a literal need for cooperation and collaboration in order to address this problem. That's why it's so important to start this early in
Well,
your
I'm going to pause you
mindset or
and say,
your.
what if we didn't?
Okay, no, we're gonna get there, but I'm just saying it's another good reason why you want to start the collaborative, cooperative
Sure.
parenting method early, so that by the time you get to be dealing with a teenager, you've got that in place. But let's say you didn't. Let's say you didn't. Let's say you have been able to kind of command cooperation up until this point, and now they're just repeatedly late for school. Okay, so basically what's happening is that they're not behaving in a way that you want them to. And the temptation is very strong to just tell them what to do or give them a consequence or threaten them or, whatever it might be. I don't know about other people, but that was certainly the temptation for me, because you just want it to stop. And there's no good reason. And this is what you're thinking. There's no good reason for them to be chronically late to school. But if there's anything that's a constant in life, it's that other people are going to be doing stuff that you don't like, that you can't control. And how are you going to approach the problem? With a teenager, as with other adults, you can't just march in and threaten them and expect them to do what you say, because they have a sense of autonomy and self-esteem that they're not going to be managed in that way. They're not going to be controlled in that way. So what would happen if you asked your child if they would be willing to talk about an issue with you? And we're going to spend 15 minutes on it this evening, but it's something that's been bothering me. I want to get your input. Would you be willing to do that after dinner tonight? Like, I don't know, around 7:30. Would that work for you? So now you've given them a heads up. You've structured it. They know it's only going to be for 15 minutes. So they're not going to tune you out in the first 2 minutes, because they don't know if this is going to be 15 minutes or 2 hours. You're going to harangue them about something. so it's a little like getting some buy-in, and it's also a respectful way of letting them know that you need to do this and you want to do this, and will they come along with you on this collaboration? Let's hope that they would say okay, but they're going in with trepidation and they're going in with defensiveness because you let them know that something needs to be talked about. And then if you presented the problem that you're having, is that you're watching them be late for school. And to you, it feels like this is something where they're learning a habit or learning a style that's probably not going to suit them well when they get older.
Yeah, that's the theme I hear all the time, that running down the road, like, what will this mean
Yes.
for my child 5 years from now, 10 years from now? That's
Yes.
absolutely one of the biggest pain points that I hear.
And I'm concerned about you getting into a pattern of this. And I want to know, why do you think it's hard for you to get up in the morning? Why do you think you're late to school? Now, at that point, you've got to be honestly curious. You've got to accept that you don't know what they're going to say next. You don't understand the situation. You are going in with curiosity and a desire to learn. Because what the child says, or the teen says in response to that, is going to, that's a fork in the road. It's going to determine how you respond next. If they say, I just can't wake up, mom or dad, I am so tired. Okay. If that's the answer, then you want to explore, why do you think you were that tired? And you're trying to solve the issue by understanding the issue. And maybe they say, well, when I have a paying job, I'm not going to be late. I don't plan to be late in my adult life. It's just that it's so boring. Math class is the first class, and I really hate it, and I don't want to go. Whatever it is, as soon as you are engaging them in a discussion about it, now you're working on the problem together. You may decide that if, for instance, if they are not showing any interest in changing their behavior at all, then you may need to tell them, I really need to think about this because I don't enjoy taking you to school when you've missed the bus, or I don't enjoy getting calls from the principal when you've been late repeatedly. So this is creating a problem for me. And I want your input on how we can make this a better situation for both of us. Again, you don't know the outcome. You don't know what they're going to come up with. In some cases, you may decide that it may be better to let them take the consequences with the school. For instance, you could talk to the principal or the teacher, and depending on how they are getting to school, you could come up with some sort of plan. Because believe me, this is not the only kid that's having this problem. I mean, teenagers have a terrible time waking up in the morning. A lot of them are not in a hurry to get to school anyway. So you're not the only parent that's struggling with this. So you can see what they might have to offer. But the other thing is that you can let them take the consequences, which may be if they don't get up, if they miss the bus, you're not going to be taking them to school, or they're going to be coming to work with you, or they're going to go over to grandma's or whatever, but they're not going to be doing anything but schoolwork during that time, because this is not what do you get to do instead of school if you're late. This is, you are still in need of an education. You are still in need of spending your time productively while you're at this age. And if you're deciding not to go to school and you don't want to do this with your friends at school, then you're going to have to do it under these conditions, because we value education, we value being on time. And so until we can work our way through this, we'll have to do something like that. But each individual situation is going to be so different.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm running my head through past workshop Q&As or clients that I know navigate this, and I'm trying to think of what's not covered in everything that you just said. When I am working with a parent, the thing I'm working with is communication skills, which you modeled just gorgeously right now. Of course you did. But the other piece is when a parent's running down the road with fear, we talk about in the workshops, when we're too fearful, we lose access to our own wisdom. And I'll just go on a tangent of neurobiology, which you already know, Dr. Gibson, but I'll share for everybody else, which leans into Dan Siegel's hand model of the world. We have brainstem, midbrain, neocortex wraps on top. And this part of our brain takes in 11 million bits of sensory information per second. And this neocortex wrapped on top takes in 50. So we've got all of this information scanning, and we need our brain to be working in an integrated way where all the parts of our brain, whether they speak in motion, sensation, images, emotions, or the logical, this is what happens next way, they all work together to have this outcome that we're looking for as parents. When we're feeling a little fearful, we can still access our wisdom. But if we're like, oh my gosh, and if this, that, and 5 years from now, what if they're blah, blah, and we're so fearful that of what will happen because they're doing this now, we lose access to our integrated wisdom, and then we lose our best wisdom as we're having conversation with our kids. So when I'm working with either in the workshops or with clients, we're talking about both communication skills, boundary skills, and then also how do we stay steady in the storm and we're free from those outdated patterns that have us running all the way down the road. However, there's a piece that's outside of the scope of things that I work in that is absolutely squarely something that you would know, which is like, when do we have our children need professional help? When is it so chronic and there's something beyond what a parent can do to support their child?
Yes, the being late to school is kind of a good one for this, because it can be that teenagers, have a hard time going to bed at a reasonable hour. They have a really hard time waking up. If they are depressed, that may be an element in why they can't or don't have the energy to get out of bed. If they're being bullied at school or they're not fitting in at school, the prospect of going back into that arena is completely demoralizing. And the morning is when they just can't face another day of that. So there are many things that can be going on. That's why
That's why the curiosity that you're
that's why
pointing to, like when
the
we sit down and
curiosity.
say, what's going on here, we're
Yes.
truly opening up that there is a vast just array of answers that our older teen can be giving.
Yeah, just like if we didn't get up and go to work, or we
Mm.
were late for work every day, these are questions that we would want to ask ourselves. Like, why is my body doing this? And
Mm.
I'm assuming that it's for a good reason. I just got to figure out what's going on with me that I can't get out of bed in the morning. So we're trying to, help our child with
Mm.
that. So when we are focused on understanding what that is, we might run into a situation where we're beginning to realize, oh, this is anxiety, or this is depression, or this is low self-esteem, or this is they are not processing social cues like I would expect them to be. Maybe this is our first sign that there's something neurodivergent going on with our child that maybe we haven't noticed when they've been in a more protected pre-high school kind of structured situation. I mean, it could be so many different things. But basically what we're looking for is that there's a sense that the child is in the grip of something that they don't like either. And it is calling the shots. In other words, there's a sense of them being overtaken by anxiety or low feelings of depression, or maybe it's fear, social fear, or maybe it's just confusion. Like, I don't know when they're kidding me or what they meant when they said such and such, if they're having a problem with social cues. So we want to be alert enough to our child's experience of the symptom, not getting this all
Mm.
the time, that we get a sense of whether or not they might need some psychotherapeutic help. In other words, they might need to see a therapist or a counselor or maybe a coach. I mean, we don't know what level is needed, but we certainly would want to always keep that in mind, especially in a teenager, because those emotional centers are so reactive. They are so intense. And we don't want to let that go on because the child is suffering, and we don't want our suffering teenager to develop a more serious mental health issue.
What I love about this example that we've just talked through in so many details is that it brings in all the pieces. It brings in modeling maturity, modeling curiosity, modeling relationality, and modeling leadership, self-leadership. Like, let me tell you why this is hard for me, kiddo. Let me hear what's going on for you. And then the leadership as their parent to be like, okay, well, based on what you have just said, here are some possible solutions, or based on what you have just said, I think I need to get some skills, or I think I would like to invite you to speak to, just there are so many possible solutions, but there's that leadership in problem solving with them that we're both doing and modeling, which is, I would say that one of the themes of this book, which is being relational, being curious, being a leader of yourself and your child so that you launch them so that they can be a leader of themselves once they are independently launched. Would you think
Yes.
that's fair
Yeah, absolutely. And
summary of?
I love your choice of words in the leadership, because that really is what you're trying to do. You're trying to be a respected leader, and nobody
Mm.
respects a leader who isn't aware of what's going on with their people that they're working with or trying to lead. I mean, at some level,
Ooh.
your style of leadership matters a lot in terms of what your child will be motivated to learn from you. And if
Wow.
you're a person who models curiosity and problem solving and frankness, openness between people, you're giving your child a huge masterclass in how to deal with difficult situations. And you're not even trying. you're just
Whoa, I love that
you're just
idea of modeling that hard
you're,
conversations.
yeah, you're just working your way of moving through difficult situations in an emotionally mature way. And
Mm,
they're learning that, they're soaking that up like a sponge. They really are there because developmentally they are tasked with that. Like, this is working on me. They notice that. This is competence. This feels
mm,
good. This feels like it's going somewhere. This feels like we're working this out. They can tell that.
mm.
And if you're doing it, they'll want to they'll want to be like that too.
Oh, it's so powerful. So as we begin to end, if you've listened this whole time and you actually do have younger children, I'm so happy for you that you found this book early on. That's fantastic. It's wonderful. If you're listening and your children are already in their older teens, young adults, neuroplasticity is on our side. If your children are actually adults, start perhaps, I'm not sure where I would, if your children are already adults and you were the emotionally immature parent, that's also neuroplasticity is on your side and on their sides. And so we're all humans on this journey. And if so, any range of it's okay. Neuroplasticity is on all of our sides. And it's uncomfortable when we've leaked our imperfections onto our kiddos, but we get to point ourselves and them to resources. But so if you have little kids or growing kids, here we go. And as we begin to end, Dr. Gibson, is there anything more that wants to be said to folks as we say goodbye?
Yeah, yeah. I guess I would say that sometimes it's worth trying to remember that you don't want to make situations worse.
Mm,
That's all. And we can sort of sense when we're beginning to wander into a
mm,
minefield. We can sort of
mm,
tell when we're, starting a fight. Um,
mm,
so what do we do instead? We may not know what to do instead. But if at least we try not to do any harm, um, that is huge. So the idea is to remember that our children are as sentient as we are. They are
mm,
as emotionally aware and as emotionally sensitive as we are, that they are complete inside
mm,
in a real way. Their inner world is just as real as ours. Now, they may not have the same intellect or the same experience or the same wisdom, okay? But they are just like us in terms of their emotional reactions to things and their emotional needs. That is the place to start. If you change that mindset into my child is just as emotionally sensitive and needs respect just as much as I do, everything else is going to have to adjust around that. And you'll be
mm,
changing the nature of your relationship with your kid in a way that is going to pay off not only when they're a child, but it's going to create the kind of relationship that is easier to continue and they
mm,
want to continue when they become adults.
mm.
So let's keep the big picture in mind with a few simple realizations that they are as real and as sensitive inside as we are. If you do that, everything else is going to fall into place.
Mm. Wise and beautiful and important words. And I love that for as you're listening, every one of you and every one of your kids, that more love in this world, that more remembering to remember to connect. Oh, thank you so very much, Dr. Gibson. People can find you in your book. How else should people find you? So this is going to be in stores starting May 18th,
19.
19th, 2026. And then if you're a clinician working with, this is like, I think every single clinician working with adult children, emotionally mature parents has to read this book. I feel like one day it's newer, it's only in the last couple of years, but I hope that one day it's required reading for every for every clinician. It's an absolutely amazing book. So how else can people find you? Where else do we want to point you?
Yeah,
People
you
see you.
can, people can go to my website, which is lindsaycgibson.com.
Oh,
And I have descriptions of all the books there and some other writings of mine that people might find interesting. But the easiest thing is go on any of the main social media outlets like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and just type my name in. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that will come up, past interviews, podcasts, things like that. And they will find plenty of material if they're curious. So
all right. Well, thank you so very much. And we'll just say to everybody, bye for now. It was a treat.
thank you so
Uh,
much, Son. I absolutely loved talking with you. Oh, it's so good to be here. I've been so looking forward to seeing you.
oh, me too. Me too. Me too. Woo, woo. Oh, my heart is smiling so big. Okay. I'm
Me
very
too.
excited.
Me too. How have you been?